Okay, shall we begin? Is my judge ready?
Yes, we just got on date, so I'm just trying to get everything together. Okay.
Is my opponent ready? Then I begin. Value success. Consider an orchestra. Each instrument is unique, valuable, and capable of creating a beautiful sound. However, it is only through a simulation that an orchestra can produce the ultimate beauty in music. With each instrument working together within a single framework and direction, every musician is assimilating to tempo, notes, and musicality. If each individual valued their own musical expression over assimilation, the orchestra would fail. Our culture values success, wealth, sports champions, means great works of art, and being the best. Culture should value assimilation over multiculturalism because assimilation is an essential force that creates prosperity. Criterion. Assimilation is the most important factor for success. Definitions. Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines culture assimilation as the process through which individuals and groups of differing heritage acquire the basic habits, attributes, and mode of life of embracing culture. It goes on to clarify the difference between assimilation and acculturation. Quote, acculturation is often tied to political conquest or expansion. And it is applied to progress of change in beliefs or traditional practices. That occurs when the culture system of one group displaces that of another. In this debate, we're talking about assimilation, not acculturation. Oxford Dictionary defines multiculturalism as the presence of or support for the presence of self-distinct cultures or ethnic groups working within a society. Contention 1. Successful organizations value assimilation and teamwork above all. Wrong teams win by assimilating their strokes to identical strength, speed, and pitch. Football teams score by assimilating to a game plan. Businesses invest far more research and training towards the goal of working as a team rather than developing individual employee contributions. Assimilation creates more value than multiculturalism. Application. Cult-like corporate culture. Microsoft, Apple, Google, GE are just a few examples of extremely successful companies that have been labeled as having a cult-like corporate culture. An attribution often associated with these companies' phenomenal success. These companies all have process through which employees are assimilated into the corporate culture. They understand that teamwork cannot be achieved without assimilating language and jargon. Company values, strategies, and methods must be assimilated if a team can work together towards a common goal. Contention 2. Multiculturalism is most valuable when used with assimilation. The affirmative is certainly not saying that multiculturalism is not valuable. Many U.S. immigrants have harnessed their native assets for great prosperity. However, it can only be achieved with success while seizing a significant amount of assimilation. Example 1. American movies and television. Asian American directors create amazing action movies borrowed from their ancestral culture, but they are best received when using assimilation, English language, American humor, and American culture references. Comedy martial arts star Jackie Chan went from earning $10 million to $250 million in the U.S. box office when he assimilated to American culture made the movie Rush Hour. Contention 3. Assimilation brings occupational success over multiculturalism. Let's look at an exhaustive scientific study that proves this statement. The United Kingdom has many different immigrant groups. Dame Louise Casey was commissioned by the British government to conduct a year-long study of integration and assimilation. Of these multicultural groups, this is what she found. Some immigrant communities choose assimilation. They lived in mixed neighborhoods, mastered the English language, participated in British culture activities, etc. These immigrant communities thrived. They had more job opportunities. They enjoyed the trust of their neighbors. In contrast, immigrant communities have valued, I can't pronounce it, and their multiculturalism and avoid assimilation and had worse jobs, worse social mobility, and were viewed with distrust from their neighbors. Assimilation doesn't mean everyone becomes identical. No one will listen to an orchestra of only trumpets. Assimilation takes our unique talents, unites them towards success. By assimilating together, we can create stronger and more beautiful prosperity, and that is something our culture values. I am ready for cross-examination.
Okay, first off, starting with your value of success, is success morally inherent? So sorry to rephrase that, just success in and of itself, is that something that's all the time, is that good?
Most of the time it is yes, though it depends on kind of how you look through it.
Okay. You talked about orchestras actually at the beginning. Would you agree that all these different instruments are, well, different?
Yes, but as I stated before in my argument, an orchestra is using all these unique talents or different instruments and they're all working together to create a goal, as in I will show a word with the simulation. And also as I did with my ending, no one would listen to an orchestra of just only one instrument. So, as I proved, with the simulation and multiculturalism can work together, but it needs more of a simulation.
Okay. So is assimilation the same thing as teamwork?
You could say that is, but it depends on where you look at it.
Okay. So would you agree that there must be conflict in today's round?
Yes, there must be, since we're obviously in a debate
So
round.
we need to actually we need to decide what really is assimilation, what is multiculturalism, and evaluate situations where they're conflicting with each other, right? So at the end of today's debate round, we're going to value one over the other, not just value them at the same time.
But as I showed, we're not saying multicultural is not valuable. Many U.S. immigrants have harnessed their native assets for great prosperity. However, they can only achieve this success while using a significant amount of assimilation.
Okay. And then, what was your criterion?
Assimilation is the most important factor for success.
So, your criterion is essentially saying that we need to have assimilation to have success, right? Okay. And you talked about, actually, going back to the value again, are there things that are more important than success?
There could be, but right now there is nothing else, because if we succeed in more job opportunities, then more people get jobs. And there could be, but right now, success is one of the most important factors.
Okay, and then also, did you provide a definition for success?
No, but I have one if you need it.
Okay. And then, yeah, actually that's all I have. Thanks. I'll be starting negative crap time. Stopping prep time, I have 1 minute and 15 seconds for me. Okay, if we're all ready? Okay, let's begin. In his famous letter from the Birmingham jail, Martin Luther King Jr. writes that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. In this age, it's easy to forget this truth, but I'll be showing you how injustice is right under our nose, and much of it's caused by assimilation. This is why culture actually shouldn't value assimilation over multiculturalism. Instead, the reverse. Culture should value multiculturalism over assimilation. So first off, before I get into the rest of my case, I'm going to present a a definition of culture for you today, because I do not believe the affirmative team brought one up. And culture can be defined by Merriam-Webster as the customary beliefs, social forms, and material traits of a racial, religious, or social group. And this is going to be very important in today's debate round, because we'll see that many of the applications brought up by the affirmative team aren't actually culture, they are something else, right? And so keeping that in mind, let's move into my counter value of human rights. Counter value of human rights. The United Nations says that human rights include the right to life and liberty, freedom from slavery and torture, freedom of opinion and expression, right to work and education, and many more. Everyone's entitled to these rights without discrimination. And the reason to prefer this definition over my opponents is that of an intrinsic worth. Human rights are worthy to be valued in and of themselves. Like, Judge, do you want to value something that is inherently moral, or something that could be moral depending on who does it right? I think the answer is pretty clear. You want to value something that is always going to be moral no matter the situation, and human rights are that. And so that moves me into my reasons to not prefer the other side's value of success. And my first response is not inherently moral, in that success, depending on the person, success for an evil guy could be taking over the world. And that's not something that's good. And so just because it's success doesn't mean that's inherently a moral thing to do, and that culture should value it. And my second response would be subjective. Subjective, as there is no definition of what success really is, it's kind of subjective. Success for me is going to look different from success from you, and different from success for the affirmative team. And so because it's subjective, we can't really weigh around on something that, just depending on someone's opinion, it could be something completely different. Moving on into, I have a contention for you of assimilation harms human rights. Assimilation harms human rights. You see that inherently with assimilation, human rights can be harmed because there's an imbalance of power, and one culture gets to decide how much assimilation is enough for the other culture. And so there is an opportunity for human rights to be harmed in the process. And I have an application of German assimilation. So this is way back after World War I, and History.com talks about it. And suddenly, German Americans became hyphenated Americans who suspiciously practiced their own traditions instead of assimilating into Anglo-American culture. And it went on to say that all of this anti-German sentiment did two things. Or actually, I read the wrong one. Okay, secondly, in response to this, German Americans began intentionally assimilating to avoid becoming targets. They changed their names to English-sounding ones, renamed German streets, and began to speak German only in private. In public, they spoke English. As a result, most American descendants from German immigrants don't speak the language or practice German cultural traditions. We see that because they were coerced and kind of forced to assimilate, these Germans have lost their culture. They had to sacrifice, they're forced to sacrifice their culture, their language, and many more in order to be accepted, in order to stop being discriminated against. We see that with assimilation, we have one dominant culture, and then the one that's not dominant doesn't have a say. They either have to assimilate or else they get discriminated against. And so we see at the end of this, the impact of this is that assimilation allows for the hurting of liberty, but multiculturalism doesn't. Having multiple cultures that can choose for themselves whether they want to assimilate or not. We give the power to the people instead of to a dominant culture that gets to decide whether they're going to be moral or not, right? So inherently with assimilation, human rights can be harmed. Moving on to some responses, he talked about corporate culture. Corporate culture, my first response is not culture. I read a definition of culture, which is the customary beliefs, social forms, and material traits of a racial, religious, or social group. Just because a certain company believes in a value, that doesn't make it have its own culture, because culture is beliefs, social forms, and material traits. And you can be part of the Anglo-American culture and be part of this corporation, but then also have someone that lives in a Jewish community and still follows Jewish customs and culture be in that company as well. Within corporate culture, or what we call what is called culture, there's no assimilation going on. It's just a value that people agree to, which is not the definition of assimilation. Also, he talked about this orchestra thing in the beginning of the speech and at the end of the speech, and I would like to clarify in saying that this is actually multicultural. You see, when you have multiple different instruments, I guess, for saying the instruments are representative of cultures, then this is the very definition or root definition of multiculturalism, which is multiple cultures. Just because they're working together, maybe that means that they agree to something or they're having teamwork. But teamwork and agreeing are not assimilation. Assimilation requires the actually changing of your culture to be like someone else. And so that'd be like the piano changing itself to be like a violin. But we don't see that in an orchestra. Instead, we see multiculturalism working in harmony. And also, in his contention too of multiculturalism is most valuable when used with assimilation, my response is no conflict. As we can both agree in today's debate round, there has to be conflict between these two terms, or between these two ideas of multiculturalism and assimilation. And saying that multiculturalism is good, also assimilation is good, that's not conflict. We need an example, contentions where there is conflict. And for these reasons, I'd ask you to vote for the negative team. Thank you.
Is my judge ready?
Yes.
Is my opponent ready?
Mm-hmm.
Let me begin. So first things first, so your value is human rights, correct?
Yes, that's a counter value I presented.
So what's your criterion?
And I did not present a criterion. I think that we can weigh this round based off of human rights.
Okay. So when you agree that what I was saying was not, they're both good, is that I said where it should value assimilation over multiculturalism, but multiculturalism is still good.
Yeah, I believe you said that multiculturalism was good in your speech. My point was that this contention to, I didn't present any conflict between the two different things.
But you agree that in my opening statement I said culture should to value assimilation over multiculturalism, correct?
Yeah.
So can't they both be good, but one be higher than the other?
Yeah, but I believe in this contention you haven't shown that. You've just shown that they're both good and they should be valued equally.
Okay. So so when you agree when your orchestra plays, there has to be someone leading it, right?
Sure.
So there's the conductor, there's always the conductor, and wouldn't you agree that if there wasn't the conductor, it would just, all of them just being played, cacophony?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. I don't need any prep time. Okay. I should have it. So, now my opponent said that in his case, that an orchestra, going for my example of the orchestra in my beginning and end, is multicultural. But we both agreed in cross-examination, if there wasn't a conductor, then there wouldn't be the beautiful music. There wouldn't be what they have. And it would be all cacophony. So if it was all cacophony, then it wouldn't be an orchestra. It would just be them all playing random their things and trying to make it kind of fit in, and no one would go and see it. And so, and now seeing counter definition of human rights. I said, this is my response. Not all human rights are right. Not all human rights are right. I know he was mostly talking about American rights, but he never said American rights. He just said human rights. So with Muslims, like their human rights is like honored killing, like killing the people, like family members because they don't believe in the Quran. But that's not human rights. One is being killed and the other is killing. That is not human rights. Right. And also success. Yes, it can. Yes, some people's value of success is different than others. But right now, what I'm talking about is like all about other things. As in, our culture values wealth, sports, champions, and success. Has art, and being the best. Like art. And it's clearly defining success there. So sorry if I didn't answer that in cross-examination. I didn't realize that right there. Continuing. Now he was saying against my corporate culture, as in there. An example to that is that they're creating their own little culture about how assimilation is like, we're doing this way, we're all going to do this. As in with Google, it's always like Google this, Google that, Google this, Google that. All of this is Google stuff, so it refers more to Google than it would to Microsoft. And the same would be for Apple and Microsoft. They're all have their own culture. Now, when he was saying Germany of them all doing that, well, that was their choice. They couldn't. I mean, sure, it was after World War II, the war they started and got almost the whole entire world into chaos, into warring each other. Like, seriously, like, sure, you should be hiding. Like, your culture literally just declared basically war against everyone else. It's like. And that's why you should vote affirmative.
Okay. I'm gonna use the remainder of my question.
Okay.
A great philosopher, Bert, told another great philosopher, Ernie, on Sesame Street, that it's easy to have ideas, but it's not so easy to make them work. And we see that the statement can be applied to literally anything in the whole entire world. But specifically in regarding to this round, we see that assimilation and multiculturalism are both ideas. But we see that at the end of today's debate round, multiculturalism is the only one that really works. Assimilation can work, but it also can not work. And since multiculturalism works all the time, that's the reason to vote negative. But I'm going to move into a voting issue first. So here's what's important, and that is voting issue number 1 of human rights. Human rights. And we've talked about this in his speech, talking about how it's intrinsic worth. I mean, it's intrinsically worthy, or how it has intrinsic worth. And actually, that's my subpoint A of intrinsic worth. Intrinsic worth. Since human rights have intrinsic worth, they should be the value that we're going to weight this round on. In the last speech, he talked about how not all human rights are rights. Essentially, that what's defined as a human right differs based off of the culture, differs based off of and I would agree for the most part. The thing is that I brought up a definition of human rights. The UN defined what these different human rights were. I read that in my first speech. That's my subpoint B of UN definition. UN definition. So we see that at the end of today's debate round, human rights is the most important value and what should be used to weigh this round. So why does the negative team win this? Well, we'll see that in my second voting issue of assimilation fails human rights. Assimilation fails human rights. Subpoint A is allows for freedom to be heard. Allows for freedom to be heard. And that was my whole point behind my first contention of assimilation harms human rights. In that inherently with assimilation, allowing one culture to be dominant and to decide what is best for the other culture, it inherently can lead to the hurting of human rights. And we see this through subpoint B of forced assimilation. Forced assimilation. This is actually a kind of response to, in the last speech, he said that the Germans kind of deserve this, that they deserve being forced to assimilate. But we still see that this is forced assimilation. No matter what they did in the past, in Germany, these were not Germans that supported the Kaiser. I mean, this is after World War I, not after World War II. But they were still forced to assimilate, which was a violation of their human rights. And my third voting issue, I guess why multiculturalism really does achieve it. We'll see this in the third voting issue. Multiculturalism achieves human rights. Multiculturalism achieves human rights. And it's because it protects human rights. It's because it protects human rights that I believe that you should vote for the negative team, because the affirmative team hasn't really upheld the burden, and we see that assimilation should not be valued over multiculturalism. Thanks.
Using all 3 minutes of prep time. It's my turn.
Yes.
It's my opponent.
Mhm.
Then I may begin. Okay, so first things first, I'd like to address is that Ernie and Bert are not philosophers. They're characters in Sesame Street. We cannot talk about them as if they're real life people. They're actually great philosophers that actually they're just characters in a made up television show. Second, so actually I have two things for it. Thing is that when he went on his case, he did not reply to my application 1 or my orchestra thing. He did not reply to that. He didn't reply with his second case. He didn't. No. And I'll apologize for thinking it was World War II. I thought it was World War II. It just sounded like he said World War II. So, next thing is that human rights are always in danger. Like thieves or criminals or murderers, or just gangsters are just like always putting human lives or rights in danger. As in you have a human right to not get your money stolen, but this thief comes along and just takes your money. Like you can't really do about that. Like even nowadays, people are still doing that. And the same with murders. There's still murders happening all over the world in great numbers. And human rights should protect you from that. So human rights are always in danger. It does not matter if he claims that simulation is hurting it. They're always in danger. So why go against a simulation if they actually protect you? Which I go into the next thing is that simulation protects you. As I said with my Quran, which he also dropped, it protect. Well, actually, might not drop. It protects you, as in you're not allowed to do honored killing. You're not allowed to do honored killing. You're not allowed to do all the stuff that other cultures let you do. So you're not allowed to do this bad thing. And so that is why assimilation protects you. If multiculturalism is then this person from this culture and a Muslim, so this person could honor kill this person. There will be more murders in them. That is why, and that is why I urge you to vote affirmative.